He returned home after his service, choosing a quiet life with his loyal dog, until a single letter changed everything. A forgotten dairy farm was suddenly his, but the land was broken, drowning in debt and decay. It should have been just another burden, yet his dog refused to ignore something hidden beneath it. Beneath that silent forest, something had been waiting, not just buried, but protected for nearly a century. Powerful men wanted the land fast, but his dog sensed the truth long before he did. And when he finally chose to look deeper, he realized this was never just about a farm. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Veteran Dog Stories for more unforgettable journeys. The morning light came quietly through the northern Oregon forest, pale and cold, slipping between tall pine trunks and settling like thin gold dust across the frost-bitten ground. It was the kind of light that didn't warm you. It simply revealed that the world had survived another night. Silas Mercer sat in the driver's seat of a faded pickup truck that had long since stopped belonging to anyone but time. The paint had peeled into dull patches, and the windshield carried a thin crack that stretched like a frozen scar across its surface. He had parked at the edge of the forest 3 nights ago and hadn't moved since. At 43, Silas still carried the unmistakable shape of a man who had once been forged into something precise and lethal. He stood tall when he stood at all, 6'1", with broad shoulders and a lean, hardened build that spoke of years under discipline. His face was sharp, the angles of his jaw clean beneath a layer of short, uneven stubble. His skin had been burned by sun and wind into a permanent bronze, and his eyes, blue-gray, distant, looked like they had learned to expect loss long before it arrived. His hair was cut short, military style, dark brown with early streaks of silver threading along the temples. Practical. Always practical. He wore the same outfit every day, an olive field jacket worn at the elbows, a red and navy plaid shirt beneath it, dark cargo pants scuffed at the knees, brown leather boots that had seen too many terrains to belong anywhere, and on his wrist, an old military watch, scratched, but still ticking with stubborn precision. Silas had not fallen apart after the war. He had simply come apart slowly. Sleep no longer came in full nights, only fragments. Jobs never stayed. People didn't stay either. Somewhere along the line, conversations became shorter, silences longer, until the only thing that remained consistent in his life was the absence of noise, except for one. Behind him, shifting slightly in the truck bed before jumping down with quiet ease, was Ash. The German Shepherd landed softly on the frost-damp ground, his black and tan coat catching the morning light. He was around 5 or 6 years old, prime working age for a K9, his body lean and powerful, built for endurance rather than display. His posture was alert but not tense, and his movements carried the calm efficiency of a dog that had been trained to think before reacting. Ash's eyes were the most striking thing about him. Deep, intelligent, always watching. Not restless, not anxious. Just aware. He approached Silas slowly, placing his front paws on the open truck door, leaning his weight just enough to be noticed. Silas exhaled through his nose. "Yeah," he muttered, voice rough from disuse. "I know." Ash didn't bark. He never barked without reason. Instead, he waited. That was the difference. The envelope had been sitting on the passenger seat since the night before. Cream-colored, thick, clean in a way that didn't belong inside a truck that smelled faintly of oil, cold leather, and old memories. Silas had almost thrown it away when he found it wedged under his wiper blade at a gas station 2 towns back. Almost. But something about it had felt intentional. He picked it up now, turning it over in his hands. The return address read, Dunn and Associates, Legal Counsel, Portland, Oregon. Ash leaned forward slightly, nose twitching. He sniffed the edge of the envelope, then paused. That pause was what made Silas stop. Ash didn't hesitate without reason. The dog lowered his head, then lifted his eyes to Silas. Not alert, not aggressive, just waiting, as if the decision mattered. Silas frowned faintly, then tore the envelope open. The law office was warmer than it should have been. Not physically, but in that artificial, controlled way that made everything feel too still, too measured. Silas stood just inside the doorway, boots leaving faint marks on the polished floor, while Ash remained at his side, leash loose, body relaxed, but alert. At the far end of the room sat a man behind a dark wooden desk. Caleb Dunn, 48, maybe 50, medium height, lean build. His posture was straight without being rigid, the kind of composure that came from years of managing problems rather than avoiding them. His hair was dark brown, with streaks of gray at the temples, neatly combed back. His face was long, thoughtful, with lines around the eyes that suggested patience more than age. He wore a charcoal overcoat over a pale blue shirt, sleeves rolled slightly, as if he preferred working through details rather than presenting them. His eyes moved from Silas to Ash, then back again. "You're Mr. Mercer," Caleb said, voice calm, steady. Silas nodded once. Caleb gestured to the chair. "You can sit." Silas didn't. Caleb didn't insist. Instead, he opened a folder and slid it across the desk. "Your uncle Thomas Mercer," he began, "passed away 6 weeks ago." Silas's jaw shifted slightly. No reaction beyond that. "He lived alone," Caleb continued. "No spouse, no children, no immediate family except you." Silas said nothing. Ash, however, had moved closer to the desk. Not aggressively, just closer. "There's a property," Caleb said. "Approximately 400 acres. Former dairy farm, Northern Oregon. It's been in your family for nearly a century." Silas's fingers rested on the edge of the folder. "Why me?" he asked. Caleb hesitated just for a second. "Because he made sure it was you." Caleb leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Your uncle revised his will 3 times in the last 6 months," he said. Silas's eyes narrowed. "Each time, he removed people." A pause. Neighbors, distant relatives, even a charity he'd supported for years. Silas's grip tightened on the folder. "And the last version?" he asked. Caleb met his gaze. "It names only one heir." Silas didn't move. "Why?" he asked. Caleb shook his head slowly. "I don't think he was choosing someone to inherit the land," he said. A quiet beat. "I think he was trying to make sure it didn't fall into the wrong hands." The rest came quickly after that. Debt. Nearly $500,000, unpaid taxes, equipment failure, livestock losses, and a foreclosure notice already in motion, 30 days remaining before the bank would seize everything. Silas flipped through the papers, each page heavier than the last. "And the alternative?" he asked. Caleb didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced toward the glass wall behind Silas. There was someone standing there. A man, tall, well-dressed, motionless. "An offer has already been made," Caleb said carefully. Silas didn't turn yet. "Kane Development Group," Caleb continued. "They're willing to assume the debt and compensate you." "How much?" "Enough to walk away clean." Silas exhaled. Clean. That word again. He placed the pen between his fingers. Ash moved first. No warning, no growl. He stepped directly in front of Silas, blocking his hand. Then, slowly, very slowly, his ears shifted forward. A low sound rumbled from his chest. Not loud, but unmistakable. Silas froze. He followed Ash's gaze and finally turned. The man beyond the glass didn't move. He simply watched. His face was composed, almost pleasant. But his eyes, cold, calculating, the kind of eyes that didn't ask. They took. "Victor Kane," Caleb said quietly. Silas looked back at the paper, then at the pen, then at Ash. The dog didn't move, didn't look away. Silas placed the pen down. "I'm not selling." Caleb closed the folder slowly. For the first time, there was something else in his expression. Not surprise, something closer to concern. "You should understand," Caleb said, voice lower now. "This isn't just a financial decision." Silas nodded. "I know." He turned to leave. Ash moved with him instantly, position shifting from barrier to partner without hesitation. As they reached the door, Caleb spoke again. "Mr. Mercer." Silas paused. Caleb's voice softened. "Whatever your uncle was holding on to, it mattered enough for him to lose everything else." A beat. "He didn't stop looking for it?" Silas said nothing. But for the first time that morning, he felt something move. Not fear, not hope. Something quieter. Something unfinished. Outside, the air was colder, the sunlight sharper. Ash stepped ahead, then stopped, glancing back just once. Silas followed. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't walking away from something. He was walking toward it. By the time Silas Mercer reached the property, the sun had climbed high enough to burn through the last threads of morning frost. The forest opened gradually, like something breathing. Tight rows of pine and fir loosening into a wide stretch of land that seemed, at first glance, almost peaceful. It was the kind of place people drove hours to photograph, and the kind of place no one stayed. The truck rolled slowly over a dirt path that had once been maintained, but now bore the uneven scars of neglect. Tall grass pushed through the tire tracks. Sections of the old wooden fence leaned inward, as if the land itself had begun reclaiming its borders. Silas killed the engine. Silence settled in. Not empty silence, but the kind filled with distant wind, birds somewhere high above, the faint rustle of branches brushing against one another. A living silence. Ash jumped down first. His paws hit the ground lightly, and he didn't wander far. Instead, he stood still, completely still, head slightly lowered, ears forward, nose testing the air. Silas stepped out after him, pulling his jacket tighter against the breeze. He scanned the property in a slow, practiced motion, the way he had been trained to do in places that didn't feel right. The farmhouse stood at the center of it all. 2 stories, Victorian structure. Dark wood weathered nearly gray. The front porch sagged slightly to the left, and the windows were clouded with dust and age. It wasn't collapsed, but it wasn't far from it. It didn't look abandoned. It looked left behind. "Home," Silas muttered, though the word didn't carry much conviction. Ash didn't move toward the house. Instead, he took a few steps forward, then stopped again. This time, his nose lowered closer to the ground. Then he turned his head slightly, scanning. Not curious. Tracking. Silas noticed. "Go on," he said quietly. Ash obeyed, but not loosely. Every step he took was measured, deliberate, like he was following something that had already passed through the space long before they arrived. Silas followed behind him, boots pressing into damp earth. The inside of the house smelled like dust, cold wood, and something faintly metallic beneath it all. Silas pushed the door open slowly. The hinges groaned, not loudly, but enough to echo deeper into the structure. He stepped in. Ash didn't follow immediately. That alone was enough to make Silas stop. He turned. Ash stood at the doorway, body rigid, ears angled. Not backward in fear, but forward in caution. "Clear," Silas said automatically, though the word sounded strange in a place like this. Ash stepped inside, but only just. He stayed close. The first hour passed in silence. Silas moved through the house with quiet efficiency, checking the water lines, testing the electrical panel, clearing a space in the living room where a mattress could be dragged later. The water sputtered back to life after a few attempts. Brown at first, then clearer. Functional. Good enough. He didn't aim for comfort, just survival. Ash, meanwhile, had begun mapping the house in his own way. He circled the same areas more than once. The kitchen, the base of the stairs, and then the floor near the back hallway. He lowered his nose to the wood, sniffed deeply, then paused. His tail didn't wag, it stiffened. Silas crouched beside him. "What is it?" Ash shifted slightly to the side, revealing nothing but old boards, scuffed, uneven, but otherwise ordinary. Silas tapped one with his knuckle. Solid. He stood. "Later," he said. But Ash didn't move. He placed one paw forward, lightly, then withdrew it. A signal. Silas didn't miss it. But he didn't act on it either. Not yet. Outside, the land stretched farther than it had looked from the road. Silas walked the perimeter slowly. Broken fences, collapsed sections of barn roofing. A small herd of thin cattle stood far out in the pasture, barely lifting their heads as he passed. This place hadn't just been neglected. It had been abandoned while still alive. Ash moved differently outside, faster, more confident. But then he stopped, abruptly, near the edge of an old livestock enclosure. Silas followed his line of sight. Nothing. Just uneven ground. Ash didn't step forward. He didn't bark. He simply refused. Silas stepped ahead of him. One step, two. Then his boots sank. Not deeply, but enough. The ground shifted slightly under his weight. Silas froze. He stepped back immediately, crouched, pressed his hand against the soil. Soft, too soft. And then he smelled it, faint, but unmistakable. Gas. Not strong enough to burn the air, but present, trapped, waiting. Silas leaned back slowly. "Good call," he said under his breath. Ash didn't respond, but his posture relaxed, just slightly. A truck approached in the distance. Old engine, slow rhythm. Silas stood turning toward the road. The vehicle that pulled in was older than his. An earth-toned pickup coated in dust and years of use. The man who stepped out moved like someone who had spent most of his life outdoors. Elias Boone, 72, maybe older, lean frame, shoulders slightly hunched, but still strong beneath the weight of time. His face was carved with deep lines, not just from age, but from sun, wind, and long seasons without rest. His eyes were pale blue, clouded just enough to suggest they had seen too much, not too little. He wore a brown canvas jacket, faded and stiff at the seams, over a flannel shirt that had been washed thin with use. His boots were heavy, mud-stained, practical. He didn't smile. "You Mercer?" he asked. Silas nodded once. Elias looked past him, at Ash. The old man studied the dog for a moment longer than necessary, then gave a small nod. "Good," he said. "You brought sense with you." Silas didn't ask what he meant. Elias walked forward without invitation, stepping onto the property like it still belonged to him. "Your uncle," he said, voice gravelly, "lost his footing near the end." Silas crossed his arms. "How?" Elias gestured vaguely toward the land. "Stopped caring for the herd. Stopped fixing anything. A pause. Started digging. Silas's gaze sharpened slightly. Digging what? Elias let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. Everything. Elias stopped walking, turned slowly toward the house. Last week before he died, he said, voice quieter now. I came by at night. Silas didn't move. Elias's eyes remained fixed on the farmhouse. He was standing out there. He pointed toward the front yard. No coat, no light. A beat. Just staring at the ground. Silas felt something tighten in his chest. What did he say? Elias's jaw shifted slightly. He said, a pause. It's not buried. Silas frowned. Elias looked at him then, really looked. He said, the old man continued, voice lower, it's waiting. The wind picked up slightly. Ash shifted closer to Silas. Not afraid. Just closer. Another vehicle approached not long after. Smaller, cleaner, a government tag on the front. The woman who stepped out moved with purpose. Mara Bellamy, mid-30s, athletic build. Not tall, but grounded, like someone who understood terrain before stepping into it. Her hair was chestnut brown, pulled back into a low tie. A few loose strands moved in the wind, catching the light. Her eyes were sharp, attentive, always measuring, always noticing. She wore a moss-green Ranger parka over a gray sweater, dark outdoor pants, and worn hiking boots. A compact backpack rested against her shoulders. Maps, tools, essentials. She walked toward them without hesitation. You're the new owner, she said, looking directly at Silas. Temporary, he replied. Mara's gaze flicked briefly to Ash, then back. That depends, she said. On what? She didn't answer that. Instead, she glanced around the property, then toward the distant tree line. You should know, she added. Most of the surrounding land has been bought up in the last few years. Silas didn't need to ask by who. Kane, he said. Mara nodded once. He doesn't like loose ends. Silas exhaled slowly. Neither did he. By late afternoon, the light had shifted. Long shadows stretched across the field. Silas stood at the edge of the yard, looking down at the ground where Ash had refused to step earlier. Ash stood beside him now, still watching. Silas didn't speak. But something had changed. The land didn't feel empty anymore. It felt occupied. Not by people, but by something left behind. Something unfinished. He looked at Ash. The dog met his gaze, steady, certain. Silas nodded once. Yeah, he said quietly. We'll find it. The house felt different that night. Not colder, not darker, just aware. Silas Mercer sat on the edge of a chair he had dragged into the corner of the living room, the old wood creaking beneath his weight. The weak light of a single hanging bulb swayed slightly overhead, casting slow-moving shadows across the floor. Ash lay nearby, but not asleep. The German shepherd's body was still, yet his eyes remained open, tracking, listening, absorbing every shift in the quiet. His ears flicked occasionally at sounds Silas couldn't hear. The house wasn't silent. It was holding its breath. Silas rubbed his thumb against the edge of the leather-bound journal resting in his hand. The material was dry, cracked with age. The corners worn down from decades of use. It didn't feel like something forgotten. It felt like something hidden on purpose. He glanced at the floor. The boards Ash had pointed out earlier were now pried open, resting unevenly against the wall. Beneath them, the cavity revealed a narrow space, just enough to conceal what Silas had pulled out. The journal, the iron key, and the folded map. Silas exhaled slowly, then opened the journal. The handwriting was precise, old-fashioned, measured. The first entries were dated 1921, milk production logs at first glance. Numbers, quantities, delivery routes. But something about them didn't fit. Silas leaned closer. The routes weren't local. They stretched beyond the expected boundaries, marked with coded notations, initials, and symbols that didn't belong to dairy operations. Ash stood up, without a sound. He moved closer to Silas, lowering his head slightly toward the open pages. His nose hovered just above the paper, not touching, just sensing. Silas noticed. "You smell it too?" he murmured. Ash didn't respond, but his tail lowered slightly. Not fear, recognition. Silas flipped further. The language changed, less formal, more urgent. Words scratched harder into the page. Transfer secured under cover of livestock. Shipment received by water, not road. Delay due to tide inconsistency. Silas's jaw tightened. This wasn't a farm. Not originally. This was a system, a network, and the farm had been the disguise. He unfolded the map next. It was hand-drawn, carefully, but not professionally. The coastline was sketched with rough accuracy, the curves of the land matching what Silas had seen on his way in. There were markings along the edge. Small coves, hidden inlets. One of them had been circled. From that point, a line ran inland, straight, direct, and ended. Exactly where the house stood. Silas felt something shift in his chest. Not excitement. Not yet. Understanding. He picked up the iron key, heavy, cold, rust clinging to its edges. Not decorative. Functional. Built to last. Ash stepped back slightly, not retreating, creating space. Silas turned another page, and that's when it changed. The writing wasn't neat anymore. It was rushed, uneven. Fear had found its way into the ink. Funds separated from product. Operational reserves secured. Ledger moved. Silas frowned. This wasn't about alcohol anymore. This was about money and something worse. Internal breach confirmed. Name withheld until secured. Trust broken from within. Silas sat back slowly. The air in the room felt heavier now. Like the past wasn't just written in those pages. It was still active. Ash suddenly froze, completely. His head turned toward the hallway, ears forward, body stiff. Silas didn't move, didn't speak. The dog's reaction wasn't aggressive. It wasn't defensive. It was recognition. Ash stepped away from Silas, slowly, then walked toward the back hallway, the same place where he had hesitated earlier. Silas followed, silent. Ash stopped at the exposed floor, the open boards, the hidden space. Then he looked down, not at the hole, not at the journal, at the ground beneath it, as if what they had found was only the surface. Silas felt the shift instantly. The realization didn't come as a thought. It came as a weight. They hadn't uncovered something. They had interrupted something. Silas crouched again, this time lowering himself fully to the floor. He ran his hand along the edges of the exposed wood, then deeper, feeling for seams, weakness, irregularities. His fingers paused. There. A slight difference in texture. Not wood. Stone. Ash leaned closer. Silas brushed away the dust. A circular outline became visible. Faint. Hidden. But real. He sat back slowly. The key rested heavy in his hand. The map. The journal. The markings. Everything pointed here. Not under the land. Not somewhere distant. Right here. Inside the structure. At its center. Silas stood. His eyes shifted toward the far end of the house, the cellar door. Ash followed his gaze, then moved ahead. Not hesitating this time, not questioning, leading. The cellar stairs creaked beneath Silas's weight as he descended. The air changed immediately, colder, damp, thicker. Ash went down first, every step careful, measured. At the bottom, the space opened into a wide, low-ceilinged room. Support beams, stone foundation, old tools scattered across the dirt floor. And, at the center, a massive stone pillar. Silas stopped. The journal hadn't mentioned it directly, but the map had ended here. Ash approached the pillar slowly, circled it once, twice, then stopped, facing it, still. Silas stepped closer. The stone was rough, uneven, built from river rock and mortar. Old, very old. He placed his hand against it, cold, solid. But something about it felt wrong, not unstable, not broken, just out of place. Silas closed his eyes for a moment, and for the first time in years, the memory came back clearly. Not fragmented, not distant. Clear. A narrow alley, a signal missed, a sound ignored. A man calling his name. Too late. Silas opened his eyes. Ash was watching him. Not moving, not pressing, just there. Waiting. Silas nodded once. "Not this time," he said quietly. He stepped back from the pillar, looked down at the ground surrounding it, then at the floor above, then at the key in his hand. Everything aligned. Not by chance, by design. Silas didn't move to open anything, not yet. Instead, he turned, climbed back up the stairs. Ash followed immediately. No hesitation, no resistance. Back in the living room, the journal lay open where he had left it. The wind outside had picked up slightly, brushing against the windows with a low, steady sound. Silas closed the journal, carefully, then folded the map, placed the key beside it. He didn't rush, didn't react, because now he understood something that mattered more than anything he had found so far. This wasn't hidden to protect something valuable. It was hidden to protect something dangerous. Ash settled near the doorway, but his eyes remained on Silas, always on Silas. Silas stood in the center of the room. The house no longer felt empty. The land no longer felt abandoned. And whatever had been buried here was never meant to stay forgotten. He looked toward the cellar door again, then down at the key, then at Ash. A faint breath left his chest. "Tomorrow," he said. Not as a decision, as a promise. The morning came colder than the day before, but brighter. Light spilled across the fields in long, pale strokes, turning the broken fences and rusted wire into something almost beautiful, like scars that had learned to exist without hiding. Silas Mercer stood on the porch, one hand resting lightly against the warped railing. He hadn't slept much. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't trust the quiet anymore. Behind him, Ash stepped out slowly, the German shepherd's paws making almost no sound against the wood. His body moved with the same disciplined control as always, but his attention had shifted. He wasn't scanning randomly anymore. He was watching the road. Silas followed his gaze. A black SUV appeared through the thin line of trees. Not fast, not slow, intentional. Silas didn't move. Neither did Ash. The vehicle rolled to a stop several yards from the house. The engine cut off, leaving the air strangely empty again, like something had just stepped into a room and taken all the oxygen with it. The driver's door opened. Victor Kane stepped out. He was taller than most men Silas had met, somewhere around 6'2", built lean rather than heavy. Not the kind of strength that came from labor, but the kind that came from control. His posture was upright, measured, as if every movement had already been decided before it happened. His coat was charcoal, perfectly tailored, falling just past his knees. Beneath it, a black turtleneck and dark trousers, clean lines, expensive without trying to be noticed. His face was sharp, deliberate, no wasted expression, no unnecessary warmth. And his eyes? They didn't search, they assessed. Silas stepped off the porch. Ash remained beside him, silent, but closer now than before. Victor walked forward, boots barely picking up dirt. "Mr. Mercer," he said. His voice was smooth, calm, not friendly, not hostile, just certain. Silas didn't offer his hand. "Mr. Kane." Victor's gaze dropped briefly to Ash. There was no fear in it, but there was recognition. "Still working dogs," Victor said. "Impressive." Ash didn't react. Victor looked back at Silas. "I assume you've reviewed the situation," he continued. "The debt, the condition of the property." Silas nodded once. "I have." Victor clasped his hands lightly behind his back, pacing slowly as he spoke, never turning his back fully, always maintaining a line of sight. "This land," he said, "is not what it appears to be." Silas didn't answer. Victor stopped walking. "It's contaminated," he added. "Ground instability, structural issues, environmental concerns that will require significant resources to address." Silas's expression didn't change. "And you're here to help?" he asked. Victor smiled faintly. "No," he said. "I'm here to prevent you from making a mistake." Mara Bellamy's truck pulled in just as the tension began to settle into something heavier. She stepped out quickly, closing the door behind her with a firm push. Her eyes moved from Silas to Kane, then to Ash. She didn't like what she saw. "Mr. Kane," she said, voice steady. Victor turned slightly. "Miss Bellamy." Mara crossed her arms. "You're not scheduled for any inspections today." Victor tilted his head just slightly. "I wasn't aware I needed one." "You do when you step onto land under review," Mara replied. Her tone wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't yielding either. Victor studied her for a moment, then smiled again. "This won't take long." He turned back to Silas. "The bank is moving forward," Victor said. "You have less than a month." Silas didn't need reminding. "I'm offering you a solution," Victor continued. "Immediate debt resolution, financial compensation, clean exit." Silas remained still. "How much?" he asked. Victor didn't hesitate. 75,000. Mara's eyes flicked toward Silas. That number wasn't casual. It was pressure. Silas let the silence stretch. Ash shifted slightly beside him. Not restless, ready. Victor took a step closer. "Take it," he said quietly. "Walk away." A pause. "This place will collapse under its own weight." Silas exhaled slowly, then said, "No." The word didn't echo, but it settled. Victor's smile didn't disappear, but it changed, subtly. "Stubborn," he said. Silas didn't respond. Victor stepped closer still, close enough now that Silas could see the faint lines near his eyes, not from laughter, but from years of holding something back. "You weren't supposed to survive that mission, were you?" The air shifted. Mara stiffened. Ash's body went rigid. Silas didn't move. But something inside him did. A flicker. A memory trying to surface. Silas met Victor's gaze. "You've been looking into the wrong things," Silas said quietly. Victor's expression didn't change. "I look into everything," he replied. Ash stepped forward. Not aggressively, not suddenly, just one deliberate step, then another, until he stood directly between Silas and Victor. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply stood there. And then Ash turned his head slightly. Not toward Victor, not toward Silas. Toward the ground. Right beneath Victor's feet. Victor paused. Just for a fraction of a second. But Silas saw it. That hesitation. That flicker of awareness. Ash wasn't reacting to the man. He was reacting to the place. And for the first time, Victor Kane stopped moving. Silas felt it instantly. The shift wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. But it was real. Victor knew something. Not guessed. Not suspected. Knew. Victor stepped back, slowly, regaining control. "Think carefully," he said, "because next time, this won't be a conversation." Silas didn't respond. Victor turned, walked back toward the SUV. No rush, no wasted motion. The engine started again, and then he was gone. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Mara exhaled slowly. "What the hell was that?" she asked. Silas didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at Ash. The dog had relaxed slightly, but his eyes were still fixed on the ground. Still watching, still listening. Elias arrived later that afternoon. He didn't need an explanation. One look at Silas's face was enough. "He came, didn't he?" Elias said. Silas nodded. Elias spat lightly into the dirt. "He doesn't come himself unless it matters." Mara looked between them. "You've dealt with him before?" Elias shook his head. "No," he said, "but I've dealt with men like him." A pause. "They don't chase land." He looked out toward the field. "They chase what's under it." Night came faster than expected. The temperature dropped, the wind picked up, and somewhere along the outer fence line, wire snapped. Ash heard it first. He was already on his feet before Silas turned. "Easy," Silas said, grabbing his jacket. But Ash was moving, fast, silent, focused. Silas followed. The flashlight beam cut through darkness as they reached the fence. One section had been cleanly cut, not broken, not worn down. Cut, fresh, the edges still sharp. Silas crouched, examined the ground. Boot prints, 2 sets, recent. Ash moved beyond the fence line, tracking. Then he stopped, a few yards into the trees. Silas caught up. Ash stood still, head lowered, something in his mouth. He turned, walked back slowly, and dropped it at Silas's feet. A strip of fabric, dark, expensive. Not torn by accident. Pulled. Silas picked it up, ran it between his fingers. Fine weave, high-end. Not something you wore to work a field. Mara stepped closer, looking at it. "That's not local," she said. Elias didn't need to touch it. He already knew. "They're testing you," he muttered. Silas stood, looked out into the darkness, beyond the trees, beyond what could be seen. Ash returned to his side, close, steady, silent. Silas tightened his grip on the fabric. "They're not buying land," he said quietly. Mara looked at him. "What are they doing?" Silas didn't look away from the tree line. "They're hunting." Morning didn't arrive gently. It came sharp and bright, slicing through the broken edges of the farmhouse windows, dragging the night's tension into something visible. The kind of light that forced things out of hiding. Silas Mercer was already in the cellar. He hadn't slept. Not really. The shovel in his hands wasn't new, but it was solid enough. Steel head, worn handle, probably the same one his uncle had used. The same one that had left shallow scars all over the dirt floor, unfinished attempts, abandoned effort, or maybe wrong guesses. Silas stood in front of the central stone pillar again. Up close, it looked even more deliberate than before. The stones weren't random. They were chosen. rounded river rock, fitted tightly, mortared carefully, built to hold weight, or to hide something. Ash stood several feet behind him, watching. Not pacing, not restless, just waiting. Silas drove the shovel into the ground. The sound echoed more than it should have. The first attempt was wrong. He dug along the outer edge of the pillar, following instinct, tracing what looked like disturbed soil. The dirt came up easily at first, too easily, loose, recently shifted. He worked for nearly 20 minutes before stopping. Nothing. No metal. No structure. Just earth that had been moved before. Silas leaned on the shovel, breathing steady but heavier now. "Wrong place," he muttered. Ash didn't move, didn't approach, just watched. The second attempt came from logic. Silas moved to the opposite side, measuring distance with his boots, counting out what might have made sense architecturally. If something had been hidden here, it wouldn't be random. It would be aligned. He dug deeper this time, harder. The soil changed, denser, packed tighter. His shoulders burned, his hands tightened around the handle. Still nothing. He stopped again. Silas stood still for a long moment, eyes closed. He could feel it. That familiar edge, the one that came before mistakes, before decisions made too fast. He opened his eyes, looked at Ash. The dog hadn't moved. But now, he stepped forward. One slow step, then another, until he stood beside the pillar. He lowered his head, sniffed once, twice, then stopped, right at one specific point, not circling, not guessing, certain. Silas walked over, kneeling beside him. "You're sure?" he murmured. Ash didn't respond, but he didn't move either. Silas drove the shovel in again. This time the sound changed. A dull, hollow resistance. Not soil, not stone, something else. He stopped instantly, cleared the dirt by hand. His fingers brushed against cold metal. He froze, then exhaled slowly. There you are. The shape emerged gradually. Circular, iron, heavy. It sat flush against the ground, hidden beneath layers of compacted dirt and time. At its center, a rusted lock, thick and solid, untouched for decades. Silas sat back on his heels. The key. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the iron key he had found beneath the floorboards. It felt heavier now, like it had been waiting for this. He cleared the lock carefully. Dirt scraped away, rust flaked under pressure. Then he inserted the key. It resisted at first, then turned, slow, grinding, until, click. The moment the lock released, Ash reacted, not by moving forward, but by stepping back. His ears flattened slightly, not in fear, in warning. A low sound vibrated in his chest. Silas froze. The air changed, subtle, but undeniable. From the opening beneath the iron hatch, a cold draft pushed upward, not stale, not trapped, moving, alive, and with it, the faint smell of salt, ocean salt, miles from the shoreline. Silas felt it in his lungs, and for the first time, he wasn't thinking about what was buried. He was thinking about what was still connected. Silas gripped the edge of the iron cover. It was heavier than it looked. He shifted his stance, braced himself, and pulled. The metal groaned, resisted, then lifted, slowly, revealing darkness beneath. Not shallow, not narrow, a vertical drop, a ladder bolted into stone, descending into black. Silas leaned forward slightly, shining his flashlight downward. The beam didn't reach the bottom, but he could hear it now. Faint, distant, water, moving water. He sat back, thinking, calculating. He had gone into worse places before, but not like this. Not alone. He stood, looked at Ash. "Stay," he said. The word came automatically. Command, clear, final. Ash didn't obey. He stepped forward instead, closer to the opening, looking down, then back at Silas. Silas exhaled slowly. A faint, humorless smile touched his face. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I figured." He crouched beside the opening. His voice dropped. "Last time I went down alone." He paused. The words caught for just a second. Someone didn't come back. Ash didn't move, didn't blink, just stayed. Silas nodded once, then swung his legs over the edge. Boots finding the first rung, hands steady on the metal. He began to descend. Ash followed immediately. No hesitation, no fear, just trust. The air grew colder the deeper they went. Damp, heavy. The smell of salt stronger now. The ladder ended after what felt like 20 feet. Silas dropped the last few inches onto solid ground. He raised the flashlight and stopped breathing. The cavern opened wide, natural, massive. Stone walls curved upward into darkness, slick with moisture. The sound of water echoed from somewhere deeper within. Waves crashing, distant but constant. And in front of him, rows. Endless rows. Wooden crates, stacked high. Faded markings barely visible across their sides. Silas stepped forward slowly. Ash moved beside him, alert but controlled. Not panicked, focused. Silas pried one crate open. The wood cracked under pressure. Inside, glass bottles, green, sealed, perfectly preserved. He stared. "Prohibition," he muttered. But it wasn't the bottles that mattered. Not anymore. The desk sat further back. Small, makeshift, forgotten. On it, a metal lockbox. Silas approached slowly, opened it. No resistance. Inside, documents, stacks of them, yellowed, fragile, but intact. He lifted one, read, and then stopped. The numbers weren't small. The names weren't random. The transactions weren't legal. And then he saw it. The signature. Kane. Not Victor. Older. But the same line, the same name. Silas exhaled slowly. The realization settled into something cold and clear. "This isn't about money," he said quietly. Ash looked up at him. Silas shook his head. "He's not protecting a business." He glanced at the documents again. "He's protecting a lie." Silas closed the box, carefully, respectfully, like it mattered. Because it did. He stood there for a long moment, looking out across the cavern, the crates, the history, the truth. Then he turned, heading back toward the ladder, Ash at his side. Above them, the world was still quiet, still bright, still waiting. But now, Silas Mercer knew something no one else did. And somewhere out there, Victor Kane was already afraid. The climb back up the ladder felt longer than the descent. Silas Mercer moved steadily, one hand gripping the cold iron rung above him, the other keeping the flashlight angled just enough to see where he was placing his feet. Ash climbed behind him, careful and quiet, claws scraping lightly against metal. Neither of them spoke. But something had changed. Silas wasn't guessing anymore. He knew. And that knowledge sat in his chest like a weight that refused to settle. By the time they reached the surface, the light had shifted again. Afternoon had begun to lean toward evening. The shadows were longer now, stretching across the floorboards like something reaching. Silas stepped off the ladder and replaced the iron cover with deliberate care. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. Because panic got people killed. He had learned that the hard way. Ash stood nearby, body angled toward the cellar door, not relaxed, not tense, just ready. Silas wiped his hands against his cargo pants, leaving streaks of dirt that matched the ones already there. "We move smart," he muttered. Ash's ears flicked. Agreement. They didn't make it far into the living room before the sound reached them. Footsteps. Not from the house, from below. Silas froze. Ash turned instantly, head snapping toward the cellar. Another sound. Metal. Soft. Careful. Someone was coming up. Silas moved without thinking. He stepped to the side of the doorway, back against the wall, body angled for leverage. His breathing slowed. Not faster. Slower. Controlled. Ash disappeared from view, not running, positioning. The cellar door creaked open. Victor Kane stepped into the room. He didn't look out of place. Not anymore. The pristine edges of his coat were gone. Dirt marked the hem, moisture clung to the fabric, but his posture remained exactly the same. Upright, composed. Like he had rehearsed this moment, only now. He was holding a gun. Matte black. Compact, suppressed, functional. His eyes found Silas immediately. "Efficient," Victor said calmly. "You saved me the trouble of locating the entrance." Silas didn't move. "Should have knocked," he replied. Victor's lips curved slightly. "I prefer certainty." The air tightened. The house felt smaller, like it had folded inward around them. Victor stepped forward, slow, controlled, never letting the barrel drift far from Silas's chest. "You found it," he said. Not a question, a statement. Silas didn't confirm, didn't deny. Victor's eyes flicked briefly toward the cellar door behind him, then back. "I wondered how long it would take," he continued. "Your uncle was close, but not close enough." A pause. "He lacked discipline." Silas's jaw tightened. "He lacked time," Silas said. Victor tilted his head slightly. "Time is a resource," he replied. "Like anything else, it can be managed or wasted." Ash reappeared. Not in front of Silas, not beside him, behind Victor. Silent, low. His body hugged the shadows, his movement so controlled it barely registered as motion. Victor didn't turn, didn't sense it. But Silas saw, and in that instant, something inside him aligned. Not fear, not anger, timing. Victor took another step forward. "Give me the documents," he said. Silas didn't answer. Victor's voice dropped. "You don't understand what you're holding." Silas met his gaze. "I understand enough." Victor's expression hardened, just slightly. "You understand nothing," he said quietly. "That cave is not a treasure. It's a liability, a record of transactions that should have never existed." Silas said nothing. Victor continued. "My family built something from that chaos. Stability, structure, legitimacy." A pause. "And now you want to tear it down?" Silas shook his head slowly. "I didn't build it," he said. Another pause. "But I'm not going to protect it either." Victor's finger tightened on the trigger. Not fully, but enough. "Wrong answer," he said. That was the moment. Ash moved. Fast. Not a bark, not a warning. A blur of controlled force. His body struck Victor's arm from behind, jaws locking onto the forearm just below the wrist. The gun discharged, muted. The shot went wide, into the ceiling. Wood splintered. Victor staggered. Silas was already moving, not reacting, executing. He stepped forward, grabbing the nearest crate stacked along the wall. Old wood, brittle with age, and drove it hard into the supporting pile beside it. The structure gave instantly. Wood collapsed. Crates shifted. Glass shattered. A cascade of debris crashed down between them. Victor pulled back, wrenching his arm free from Ash's grip, but the damage was done. The gun slipped from his hand, clattered across the floor, disappeared under broken wood and glass. The room filled with sound, splintering, shattering, movement. Silas pushed forward through it. Ash stayed low, circling, ready. Victor lunged, not for the gun, for Silas. They collided hard. Silas felt the impact through his ribs, but didn't lose footing. He shifted his weight, driving his shoulder forward, redirecting momentum the way he had been trained to do years ago. Victor fought differently. Less technique, more control, calculated. He grabbed for Silas's collar, pulling him off balance. Silas twisted, drove an elbow into Victor's side, hard. Victor exhaled sharply but didn't drop. Ash darted in again. But this time, Victor was ready. His free hand caught Ash's movement, deflecting it just enough. Not clean, but enough. Ash yelped. Not loud, but sharp. Silas froze, just for a fraction of a second. And in that fraction, the past tried to come back. The alley, the missed signal, the moment he had hesitated. But this time, he didn't. Silas drove forward again, faster, harder. He didn't think, didn't calculate. He closed the distance and slammed Victor backward into the collapsed crates. The weakened structure gave way again, wood snapping under pressure, forcing Victor down. Ash recovered. Quick. Despite the hit, he moved again. Not reckless, not wild. Precise. He circled. Positioned. Blocked Victor's movement from the side. Victor tried to stand. But the footing was gone. The floor beneath him uneven now, scattered with debris. Silas stepped in. Pinned him, controlled the arms. For a moment, it was over. Then, sirens. Distant, but coming. Victor's expression changed. Not fear, something else. Resignation. You don't know what you've started, he said quietly. Silas didn't respond. He kept his grip firm, unmoving. The front door burst open minutes later. Deputies entered fast, weapons drawn, voices sharp, controlled. Mara Bellamy was right behind them, breath tight, eyes scanning. Her gaze landed on Silas, then Ash, then Victor. It's him, she said. That's Victor Kane. The deputies moved in. Cuffs snapped into place. Victor didn't resist. He didn't need to. As they pulled him up, he looked at Silas one last time. Not angry, not afraid. Just calculating. Silas released his grip, stepped back. Only then did he turn, to Ash. The dog stood still, but his front leg trembled slightly. A thin line of blood ran through his fur. Not deep, but real. Silas dropped to one knee, hands shaking. Not from exhaustion, from something else, something he hadn't felt in years. Hey, he said quietly. Ash's ears lifted slightly. Silas pressed his forehead gently against the dog's. You're good, he murmured. You're good. For the first time since the war, Silas Mercer didn't feel like he had lost something. Outside, the light was fading. But it didn't feel like the end of the day. It felt like something had finally begun. The land didn't change overnight. That was the first thing Silas Mercer noticed. Even after everything, the sirens, the arrest, the quiet chaos that followed, the fields still stretched the same way they had the day he arrived. The fences still leaned, the barns still sagged. The house still carried its weight like it had for nearly a century. But something inside it had shifted, something that couldn't be seen from the road. The investigation moved faster than Silas expected. Not because the system worked quickly, but because what they had found beneath the property couldn't be ignored. Within 48 hours, federal vehicles replaced county cruisers. Men and women in plain jackets arrived, their movements efficient, their questions precise. They didn't waste time asking what Silas had found. They already knew. Or at least, they knew enough. One of them stood out. Agent Daniel Rourke, mid-40s, tall but not imposing in the traditional sense. His build was lean, controlled, like someone who preferred observation over force. His hair was short, dark, flecked with gray at the temples, and his face carried a quiet seriousness that didn't need to announce itself. His eyes were sharp, focused, but not cold. He approached Silas on the second day. "Mercer," he said, extending a hand. Silas shook it once, firm, measured. Rourke glanced briefly toward Ash, who stood beside Silas, posture relaxed but attentive. "Good dog," he said. Ash didn't move, didn't need to. Rourke didn't speak in long explanations. He spoke in fragments. "The documents, they're real." Silas nodded. "I figured." Rourke exhaled slightly. "There's enough there to open multiple federal cases, financial fraud, historical laundering, asset concealment across decades." He paused. "And more." Silas didn't ask what more meant. He didn't need to. "Victor Kane isn't the end of it," Rourke added quietly. Silas looked past him, toward the tree line. "I know." Ash suddenly stepped forward, not toward Rourke, not toward Silas, toward the edge of the yard. His ears lifted, body still. Then he sat, right there in the grass, facing outward, not guarding, not tracking, waiting. Silas frowned slightly. Ash didn't sit like that without reason. Rourke noticed too. "What's he doing?" the agent asked. Silas didn't answer, because he didn't know, but something about it felt final, like the dog wasn't reacting to danger, but to its absence. The weeks that followed were slower, not easier, just grounded. Silas didn't see a single dollar. Not at first. Everything had to be verified, cataloged, authenticated. The crates below were documented one by one, each bottle examined, each marking recorded. The process wasn't quick, and it wasn't clean, but it was necessary. The past, it turned out, couldn't just be uncovered. It had to be understood. Mara Bellamy remained close through it all. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. She moved between roles with quiet efficiency, sometimes assisting federal teams with land documentation, other times simply bringing supplies or checking in. Her presence wasn't loud. It didn't demand attention, but it stayed. One morning she arrived with coffee. 2 cups, black. Silas was already outside, working on the fence. He had replaced 3 posts by then. Not perfectly, but better. Mara leaned against the truck, watching him for a moment. "You don't strike me as a farmer," she said. Silas drove the hammer down once more. "I'm not." She handed him the coffee anyway. "Then what are you doing?" Silas looked out over the field, then down at Ash, who lay in the grass nearby, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed but still aware. "Fixing something," he said. Mara didn't ask what. Elias Boone returned too, more often now. He didn't say much, didn't need to. He brought tools when they were needed, advice when it mattered, and silence when it didn't. It took nearly 2 months for the first official number to come in. Silas didn't read it right away. He didn't rush to open the envelope, because money had never been the thing that pulled him forward. When he finally did, he exhaled once. That was it. No smile, no reaction, just a quiet breath. The debt was gone, cleared completely, taxes settled, ownership secured. The rest, the auction, the collectors, the headlines. That came later. But it didn't change what mattered. Silas didn't sell the land. He didn't leave. Instead, he built. It started small, a cleared section near the barn, then a repaired enclosure, then a new structure, simple, functional, not for cattle, for dogs. The idea didn't come all at once. It grew. The same way the land was beginning to. Slowly, naturally, a place for veterans, not a program, not a system, just a place where people who had come back, different, could learn how to move forward again, not alone. Ash healed faster than expected. The injury had been shallow, painful, but not permanent. Within weeks, he was moving the same way he always had. Steady, alert, present. Silas watched him one afternoon as he lay in the sun. No tension, no urgency, just still. It was a different kind of strength. Rourke visited once more before everything closed. No uniform, no case files, just a quiet conversation by the porch. "You did something most people wouldn't," the agent said. Silas shook his head slightly. "I just didn't walk away." Rourke nodded. "That's usually the difference." When he left, he didn't say goodbye. Neither did Silas. Because some things didn't need words. The seasons shifted. The air warmed. The grass grew thicker. The fences stood straighter. And one evening, Silas found himself standing on the porch, exactly where he had been on his first day. But not the same. Ash stood beside him, closer now, not watching the road, not listening for movement, just there. Silas rested his hand gently against the dog's head, fingers pressing into the thick fur between his ears. Ash didn't move, didn't look up. He didn't need to. Silas exhaled slowly, then said quietly, "You saw it before I did." The wind moved through the trees. Soft, steady. Ash didn't answer, but he stayed. And for the first time in a long time, Silas Mercer didn't feel like he was waiting for something to end. He felt like he had finally found where to stand. Sometimes miracles don't come as light from the sky or voices in the dark. Sometimes they arrive quietly, through a loyal companion, a second chance, or a moment when you choose not to walk away. Silas Mercer didn't find salvation in money or buried treasure. He found it in a path he almost missed, and in a dog who never stopped trusting him to see it. Maybe that's how God works in our lives. Not by removing every hardship, but by placing something or someone in our way to guide us when we're lost. In your own life, you may not hear a voice calling your name, but you might feel something, an instinct, a pause, a presence that asks you to look closer, to choose differently, to believe again. That could be your moment. That could be your miracle. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We would love to hear your story. And don't forget to subscribe to Veteran Dog Stories for more stories of courage, faith, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their dogs. May God watch over you, guide your steps, and bring peace to your heart wherever you are.